right, Russ, we are live and working. Thank you for your patience, everyone. We took a little holiday from this and came back. Facebook changed things truly overnight. Warnings, buzz, server overloads, just to get the wonderful guest we have here today. Thank you for joining. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you.
All right, we are back. We've got a man who's had some incredible travels. We've got to see the whole shirt. So it says, I visited countries that you don't even, we can't quite know exist. Fantastic shirt. I think we need to open the merchandise store.
Because a lot of people say, I've been everywhere, name the countries, and I name a couple of countries, they have no idea, I end up with free drinks. Works in life.
That is fantastic. And speaking of one that doesn't exist but may soon, you were in Bougainville during the recent referendum, which, as I understand, voted for independence, but is still unresolved exactly what that's going to mean in practice.
That is correct, and that was just purely accidental because I was sort of following Bougainville, and the referendum was supposed to happen last July. And I thought I'd buy a ticket for last October, and I'll show up when it's all voted and all done, and I'll be one of the first people, maybe in the first 100, to visit a new country. And then turns out they postponed the referendum to the 21st, I believe, of October, and maybe in November. And I basically, that's the day I arrive, and they pick me up at the airport, my guide, and they take me straight to the voting booth, not to vote, but to observe. And it was an incredible experience. Basically, I was number one foreign guy in that country in that day, besides the observers.
Wow, and I mean, it place the territory in the world, what you understand of why they were being independent, and then what it feels like to be at the birth of a new nation.
Well, the Bougainville is technically, at this point, is part of Papua New Guinea, but it's a totally separate island, and it's actually part of a different archipelago, separate from Papua New Guinea. And they've tried going independent for many years, and they had a civil war that basically annihilated pretty much the whole island in the past. And now I think China is sort of backing it up partially. So the referendum happened, and it was 99.9 voted for independence. It's a small nation, but they have massive copper mines that are abandoned at the moment. But if they're restored, they basically can generate 40% of GDP of the whole Papua New Guinea.
Oh, wow. And I've put on the screen a few photos that you shared. You're a photographer, avid photographer as well. So walk us through a bit of what we're seeing here. And I think I can magically make it bigger by going that way. All right. So we've got neutral, impartial, transparent, professional, inclusive referendum. You really were there. So.
Yeah. They had observers from 5 nations, including Australia, New Zealand, I think a couple others, maybe China, and there are huge lines at the polling booths, basically in the heat of 35 Celsius and probably like 95 Fahrenheit, and people are standing, and little kids with vote number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Picture from Bougainville too. There's a beautiful island, really, with a lot of beaches, and it's completely undeveloped. It's completely rough. There are no hotels, no tourist infrastructure whatsoever. The roads are dirt, and everything betel nuts. That's what you see in this picture.
Ah, so the dark teeth must be on the. I guess these downloaded a little out of order, but this must be flying in.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's how it looks from the. Just when you land, it's a spectacular island, all in the fog and clouds, and all these channels separating different parts of it. That's the kids that performing a little show for me that one of the guides organizing his family. It's completely, that's me basically next to the voting booth.
Oh wow! It looks like a county fair.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. It's basically you were seeing how the nation is being born. I mean, they voted overwhelmingly for independence, so now it's in the hands of the Papua New Guinea Parliament to kind of approve it, but it's long in the making. So I kind of hope and keep fingers crossed that it'll be the new 194th country one day, probably soon.
And this, I would guess, is another child from the performance?
Correct.
Yeah. And this is a great example. You share a lot of photos of plants, and I feel in flowers and such, and I feel like you do such a great job of capturing. And whenever I try to photograph any of these, it ends up looking terrible.
Well, nature photography was kind of first passion before all the traveling to cultural spots. But that's actually a rare orchid that grows on this island, and it grows right in that Pangana mine that was, the reason for the whole civil war in the past. So the thing in the background you see, that's the actual mine, abandoned, but it's one of the biggest open pit mines in the world. That's the one that produced all the copper and some gold and platinum and so on and so forth.
Wow.
And that's at the end of the performance. We did the little group with everybody in it. And that's a view from a little islet separating the two different parts of Bougainville archipelago. That's actually, Bougainville is not just one island. There's several there, but one big one, and then the rest is small. It's a small population. It's definitely not ready for tourism anytime soon, but I'm sure the moment independence happens for real, there'll be a lot of people like me and you and a lot of other country collectors who will basically rush there.
So you will go back for the purpose of officialdom.
No, I think for me, the like checking passport stamp is not as important as really having been there. So I think I've seen it, and when it changes, maybe I'll try some other islands around. I'll go, but I consider having by now.
And what are the logistics of going there in good times?
Well, I mean, it's right almost on the equator, so the times are pretty much good at any point. But I think at this point, the only logistic available is flying from Papua New Guinea, which is not that difficult. I mean, I flew from Australia, from Cairns into Papua New Guinea, and then it's 1 hour layover, and you fly to Bougainville. So it wasn't that difficult or complicated. I think they want to open the connection with Solomon Islands, which technically the Bougainville archipelago is part of the Solomon Islands archipelago. And see the Solomon Islands right from the end of Bougainville. It's like a small strait separating them. But I think it's still closed. And now in the COVID, I think everything is closed.
And lush is certainly one word, but you also see the scars of human intervention. So
yeah, that's the Pangana mine. That's a huge mine. And the pictures don't even kind of describe how massive and how to horizon this whole thing is. And no people, no tourists. I was the only probably foreign tourist that day besides the observers, the whole week probably.
Wow. And my recollection of my own visit to Papua New Guinea, and I went to Rabaul for instance, which was an expensive flight. I think later Qantas added them as a partner where I could have redeemed some points for, but a pricey part of the world to travel around. Was this your experience as well?
No, I think this was sort of reasonable. I mean, it was definitely not kind of like Thailand or Vietnam, but it wasn't outrageous. I think I didn't spend a lot of time there, probably 3 days all in total. It was sort of mid-range price, and probably definitely way below mid-range in terms of quality.
Fantastic. And that's certainly an exciting one. And in the neighborhood, we saw news just last week about with even one area of the Solomon Islands that is talking about going independent just because they're upset about the political recognition of PR China and Republic of China, Taiwan, and that. So it, we I guess we can think of these the climate of places and think these are just calm paradises, but they're as complex and interesting as any human population around the world. I love that window into. I'm thinking a bit like when I visited Bhutan, and you see these little government offices in temples, and it'll say like Department of Census, and it's one guy with a book in there, and I love these windows into very small countries and territories of how they operate.
But I think that's the beauty of travel, when places that are not on the main sort of travel list for most people. Infrastructure, there is no, probably all these tourist outs and tours and everything, and then you get like the real authentic cuisine, the real authentic people. It's all simple, but it's like it's real. And me, getting lost somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Bolivia or Colombia or Africa, hopefully sometimes if it's possible, it's much better than
Mm.
Switzerland or UK.
Hmm. So let's talk a little bit about your background, and it'll lead to some of your recent travels. Spent much more time than you expected in Ukraine, for instance, and know a lot about Belarus. So let's talk a little bit about that part of the world.
Well, I'm originally from Belarus, but I've
Hmm.
been in the US since '92. I went to college here. I went to grad school here. I worked here on Wall Street for
Hmm.
a while, and now I'm sort of traveling. But when I travel around the world and people say which country I'm from, I say Belarus first. Sometimes I say US first. It depends on the situation, which country people prefer more. I mean,
Hmm.
nobody really knows much about Belarus, so usually when I mention the country, it takes next 10 minutes to explain what it is. Fortunately, it's in the news these days, and it's really sad what's going on there. And I hope this kind of get resolved soon. But you know, and
Yeah.
yes, was in Ukraine. Stuck, I guess, is not necessarily the right word. It was a nice experience being stuck there. I'd get stuck there anytime, as my girlfriend is from Ukraine, and so it was a great time being there and being there for so long. But yeah, when we went together to Socotra, and it was one of the last trips available to Socotra last March, and when we came back, the whole country just shut down and quarantined. There were no flights out, no flights in until from March 12th until June 22nd. So we basically spent all the time in Ukraine, but we explored the entire country. We visited together every single region of Ukraine except one tiny region. So east, west, north, south, center, and over. And it was springtime. It was fantastic. I'm like an expert on Ukraine, even probably better than some of the Ukrainians.
I would wager that. I mean, so many of us travelers, our blind spot is the country we're from. So I imagine many Ukrainians would, and it's such a large country too. I mean, I've not been in the far west at all. I mean, nowhere. I took a road trip, mostly up and down through center regions and some smaller areas, but not the far east or the far west. And that taking a road trip puts in perspective how large of a territory it is. So the for the collectors among us, and I realize there's different political interpretations of what is or isn't the country, but how many states, how are you organizing this in terms of a very systematic, long approach to visit?
Well, and it kind of evolves with even COVID. Some people decided to basically shut themselves down and in their apartments or houses and never get out. But
Mhm.
yes, it's difficult to go country to country and lob 5 or 6 countries in one trip. But on the other hand, you can take a big country like Ukraine, like Russia, like the States, Mexico, Brazil, and basically, explore it in really great detail because I'm definitely not the type of traveler who wants to check it off and kind of be done with it. I want to explore every single corner of every single country, and because it's
Mhm.
really different, Eastern Ukraine is not the same as Western Ukraine, and it's not the same as Odessa in the south, and Kiev is different, and Chernobyl is in the north, is like completely different world. So
Mhm.
once you hit all of it, even in Ukraine, it's you visited probably 22 countries. That's how many regions they have, and then
Mhm.
compared to the states, it's massive. And South Dakota is definitely not New York, and it's definitely not Washington State, and it's completely different from Florida. You have 48 countries and just here connected continentally.
And I've been interested of people who they've been to every country or they have this depth interest of visiting every state or every province of a country and which ones they pick. So I know you've recently been working on the U.S. and we'll talk about that. But in terms of Ukraine, it's not one I've heard of travelers saying. I hear about India, Brazil, China, Russia, some of these. So what did you get out of nearly 22 states of Ukraine that the shorter visit we missed?
Well, you can. I've posted everything on my website,
Mhm.
travelunlimited.com/Ukraine. There's, I think, 120 different posts, and it's completely different in terms of scenery, culture. There's the whole western side is the mountains, and you get this tiny wooden churches that 700 years old, or even maybe 1,000 years old. In the south, you get the Black Sea, and you get these pink lakes that nobody
Mhm.
ever heard of. Everybody thinks,
Mhm.
lake in Australia and one big lake somewhere else in Africa. And in Senegal, but they're massive, massive, beautiful salt pink lakes in Ukraine that are just like mind-boggling. And then
Mm.
there you get the open pit mines. They're fantastic. They're forests. You can go mushroom picking. Then there are in the whole east of the country. There are the large megapolis cities with beautiful 500-600 year Russian churches. It's spectacular. It's all around just beautiful. And
Wow. Yeah, when sharing so many of your pictures that I saw, it was you said the nature photography is an early passion of yours, and seeing these rolling fields of flowers. I mean, from history, for 20th century history, we viscerally know so much about the wheat fields of Ukraine that became a source of global competition and war. But this incredible beauty was eye opening to me.
thank you. It's really, that's kind of the beauty of travel. Sometimes you I don't travel randomly. You sort of do research in advance and you plan it out and you decide how you're gonna go, what's your route is gonna be. But then sometimes we're just driving around and you stumble at something that you don't expect, didn't read about, and it's stunning. Be it nature, be it culture, or even cuisine. Ukrainian cuisine is amazing and it's so much variety, and it's a little on the heavy side in terms of calories, but it's fantastic.
You keep a slim figure, so how do you manage to stay fit on the road?
Well, you move a lot, you hike a lot, you climb mountains, and you sort of. And when you have a beautiful girlfriend, you kind of need to be in shape for that too.
And as you said, she's Ukrainian, so I think between her teaching and your deep travel experience, you mentioned the food as being delightful, high calorie. But are there specific regional areas that you would say the foodies, the self-styled foodie travelers, they should really focus on this town or this state for a particular amount of variety or distinctive food?
Well, I think the center Kiev will give you a little bit of everything. The whole western side, it's Carpathian Mountains. The cuisine there is closer to Slovak or Romanian or Hungarian, so there are influences from there, but it's still
Mm.
local. And then in the south, you get this all the Black Sea, so there's a lot of fruits, there's a lot of fresh stuff, and plus there's a lot of winemaking there too. Quality wines,
Mm.
quality snacks.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the best experiences actually in the western Ukraine was, they have these massive bowls that are filled with boiling water. Well, not boiling, but hot water, and you're basically sitting there, relaxing right on the edge of the river. They're called chans, CHAN. It's just like a spa, but it's all natural and it's traditional there. Incredible.
Oh, well, wonderful. And you are from Belarus originally, and recently we spoke to a guest who had been there and seen some sites that I had just totally missed. So we'll assume that the visitor is going to visit Minsk in some degree and has a lot of resource of information. Maybe Brest, they have some idea of the fortress. Wider around the country, I feel like there's not a lot of information floating around that really jumps out to the traveler. So if we were going to be systematic about visiting Belarus, and again, we note that at the current moment there's some very severe political disruptions in addition to the pandemic, but we'll assume in better times for the country and the world. What is some of the depth of travel that you'd recommend in Belarus?
I've done a fair amount in Belarus, and you can probably see some of it on the website. Same address
Mhm.
/Belarus. As you mentioned, the Brest Fortress is spectacular, but also there's a Belovezha National Park in the western side of the country, which is one of the last untouched forests in the whole European continent, and it's also
Mhm.
the in Europe and the only place in the world where you can see European bison just roaming around. That alone, to
Mhm.
10 out of 10. And then you get Belarus is a lot of nature, a lot of forests, a lot of marshes and bogs. And then the northern part has some interesting churches in Polotsk and Vitebsk. The south is the one that got affected by Chernobyl, but it's still a lot of raw nature there. Just got to wait for for better times politically to the whole situation to get resolved. But one last thing to mention is the Mir Castle. It's a UNESCO site actually, not far from Minsk, maybe an hour drive. But it's a restored massive castle with castle fortress with 5 towers. It's definitely on par with anything medieval European stuff you see.
Wow, that's incredible. And yeah, in their politics is so complicated, I think, in the region, and how to understand your perspective as from Belarus, how to uh, for the intro traveler, what is Belarus, how to understand. It's so much of, I think, the identity of Belarus is contested in politics in Ukraine. What's the capsule to know and understand and be aware of when you're heading in?
Well, it's unknown for really because it sort of never got either west or east, and it's been an independent country since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Soviet Union, it was an independent republic, one of the 15. It was never part of Russia. A lot of people think
Mm-hmm.
it was actually a member of United Nations since the foundation in '48. Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
Russia, that were, in addition to the Soviet Union, members of the UN. It historically it goes back to the 15th century when there was a great duchy of Lithuania, but it was really Belarus as it's known now. The language was Belarusian, and the culture and everything else was kind of dating back from that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a bridge between the East and West. Unfortunately, it suffered a lot in every single war that happened on the European continent. Napoleon goes for Moscow, Belarus gets trashed. Germany attacks the Soviet Union, Belarus gets trashed. Every fourth citizen, 2.5 million, died in the Second World War. So it's kind of got wiped
Mm-hmm.
out. And every, Swedish knights attacking South, fighting the Tartars, the same thing happens again. So Belarusian people, after all that, are a little bit tolerant and kind of, not necessarily politically active. But as you can see what's happening now, I mean, there's a limit for everything. And at some point, you just have to sort of fight for your rights a little bit.
Oh, thank you. And generally, the rule for travelers has in much of that region of the world has been, if you can learn some Russian, it's helpful. Is that still the case, or is it political now? I would guess that for a traveler, it shouldn't matter if you're
Uh,
trying to speak Russian, or.
I think for Belarus, and Belarus is pretty. It was the westernmost republic of the former Soviet Union. A lot of people speak English. I think you wouldn't get lost. I mean, especially in the capital, you
Mm-hmm.
don't even need to know anything local. But
Mm-hmm.
this it has Google Translate, and I can't. Before I travel to any country, I load stuff up and the language on Google offline, so I can communicate anywhere. I think in Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, not knowing Russian, you'll be okay with English. It's not like you're in China and in the middle of nowhere, and then you don't have Google Translate. Then you're a little bit screwed.
Excellent. Heading over to another place with a lot of political disturbance at the moment is you referenced completing your U.S. 50-state journey, and a year ago I went to my final 2 of the 50 states to visit. I'm from Minnesota originally, and the final 2 I thought as a bookend, Alabama, Mississippi, the other end of the Mississippi, and for what I identify probably the farthest in culture and experience from my own background. And I'm curious, you come here as new to the entire United States, lived, of course, many years. What new discoveries have you made by expanding out to the full 50 at this point?
Well, I've actually been to all 50 back in
Uh-huh.
2002, 2003. I've seen every single state and every national park. So
Mm-hmm.
it was, me and my girlfriend traveled together this time, and it was kind of a challenge to hit every state. So for her, it was definitely eye-opening because you sort of have an expectation of America, and maybe you've seen New York, and maybe you've seen LA, and maybe you've seen Florida, but
Mm-hmm.
everything in between it was basically culturally
Mm-hmm.
a total shock slash astonishment slash the nature in the whole out west is out of this world. Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, culture in the middle is it's totally you're driving to a different state.
Mm-hmm.
You walk around in California, especially during the COVID days, and everybody's completely masked up, everybody keeping distance. You hike in the forest in California, and everybody is looking at you, even if you move your mask off your face. And then you arrive in South Dakota, and you walk down the town of Deadwood, or next to the Mount Rushmore. You're in a mask, and everybody is yelling at you, take it off, because that's totally not acceptable.
all of the national parks, that's also been something that in recent years I've started. I'm at around a third. It's heavily weighted towards the western half of the U.S.
Well, they keep parks every year, so it's a little bit of a moving target. I didn't even realize that in the last couple of years there were two more added. The White Sands National Monument is now a national park.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis Arch is now a national park.
And also Indiana Dunes, which I did visit. I had a conference to attend in Chicago last fall and went out there. It's a very modest site, but I think it's worthwhile. It's an interesting little slice of territory and history posted around it, how it was saved over decades from a very industrial area. It's not on the grand sweep of some of the larger parks, but yeah, the Gateway Arch, that does seem pretty. It's nobody's idea of a national park, and as I understand it,
well, I think it's historically similar to Acadia, where it was basically patches of land that were in private hands, state hands, and then eventually transferred, glued together, and it's a national park. It still elevates it significantly in the eyes of tourists, especially coming to these places.
Yeah, I think for Gateway Arch, it was they estimated the difference between national monument and national park or national historical site is just massively millions and millions. So that's why they went to call it a national park and got away with it.
Yeah, but we traveled through the states. We didn't try to sort of limit ourselves to national parks. We visited national monuments, national historic sites. I mean, anything that you look into it, you read about it, and if it's interesting, you visit it. It's kind of the same with countries. Just because some region of the country is not a separate entity doesn't mean you go see it. When it comes to travels, I don't get sort of narrowed in terms of what counts as a separate country, what counts as a city, what's a national park, what's just a little tiny park with interesting natural attraction. If it's interesting, you got to go see it.
And am I right to think that your original trip to 193 and that was mostly solo travel?
For the most part, yeah.
So what's changed, and what new perspectives have you gained by having a travel partner for many of these recent trips?
Oh, it's just like heaven and earth. When you travel alone, it's frankly, I want to redo the whole thing now together, which is
wow.
As they say, inshallah. But let's see what happens.
Talk about that first round. So what years was that first 193 round?
Well, it finished in 2018. To be honest, I never pursued 193. I just sort of traveled. I was more obsessed with seeing animal migrations than visiting countries. And these migrations happen to be in different countries. So you sort of, you accumulate countries, you go here and there. So I think by 2012, I had about 80 countries under my belt. And I thought, well, I have 80. The whole thing is 193 or something. I didn't even know how many they are. So maybe I might as well just kind of wrap it up. And without chasing them, they just sort of kept adding and adding and adding. And then you get sucked into the whole culture aspect of it. Interesting. And then the whole cuisine aspect and people. You basically expand your horizons. You're just like not narrow-minded on animal migrations anymore. And then, one by one, and the whole challenge of getting into tough ones like Yemen or Syria or Libya, which, definitely cherry on the cake.
Let's go back to those animals.
Yemen was my last country in 2018.
Which one, sorry?
Yemen.
So that was, and talk about that visit. That's the mainland. That's Socotra. That's how does it take shape?
2018 was the mainland visit from Amman. Socotra was technically my second trip to Yemen, although de facto it's an independent place. Yemen was basically the last. I have my own list of countries / locations. Basically, it's 317 on it. So Yemen was the last on that list. That happened this March. It was literally next week after we left from Yemen. They shut the whole island down for COVID, and there are no flights anymore. It's completely disconnected. And then since then, there's been 2 mini civil wars on the island. But
well, I can share a few photos of Socotra while you're there. So you can walk us through some of the beauty of Socotra.
It's again one of those places that it's been on my list for a long, long time to visit. They call it Galapagos of the Indian Ocean.
Hmm.
80% of the flora and fauna of this island are only there and nowhere else. It's like Madagascar in a way. These are the dragon blood trees for which the island is famous. They grow only there and nowhere else on Earth. And there are groves of the dragon blood trees in the mountains. It's the whole island is all about nature. There are no big towns. There's not that many people. There's no industry at all. But it's just fishermen, simple people, and this stunning, absolutely stunning nature for hiking. And you don't stay in a hotel. You stay on a little tent right on the beach, and there's a moon rising in the evening and the sun rising in the morning. These are bottle trees, and if you go in March, as we did, this is the time when they bloom with beautiful pink flowers, which is just surreal.
Yeah, for my own visit, I was amazed. I mean, the dragon's blood trees are the iconic image going in, you know that, and then there's so much that feel like out of Dr. Seuss, like these bottle trees.
To me, bottle trees were even more unique than dragon blood trees. But
Mm.
look at the names, dragon blood
Mm.
tree. You're on a different planet. This is a beach in the western part of Socotra, completely desolate, completely empty. Look at the colors, the water, the algae, the beach, and then right there, we were invited to join. I think it was like 10 guys sitting in around a huge rice bowl, eating rice and goat, and we were basically playing cards with them, eating, and it's incredible. Culturally, it was just like an eye opener.
Mm.
Yeah, these are the flowers of the bottle trees.
Wow, yeah, incredible. Yeah, I was there in April of the 2019, so I saw as well incredible sights. Yeah.
And the canyons and the beaches and their caverns to explore. It's you know, and we basically tented and camped right on the beaches, and the guides tried to sort of provide different cuisines for us, and then I think it was on the third day of the trip out of a week total. The goats, there were a lot of feral goats. They ate every
Mm.
what for us without food, and then we told the guides, all we care about is just like fresh fish if you can get that. So the guy would
Wow.
thread and a hook to every morning or just during the day, just throw it in, pull up 5 6 fishes out of the water, and we just ate fish for the rest of the trip. It was awesome. you know
Mm.
you grill it in fire, grill it just on the stones, and you eat it. It's so primitive and yet so authentic. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I follow as one of the great unheralded seafood destinations of the world.
Yeah, this is one of the remaining tanks from the when there was a war there. Actually, there was never real war there, but southern Yemen versus northern Yemen, and that's one of the caves on the center of the island.
And that's the fishing. You're the fishing expert.
That's like 4 out of 20 that we caught in the matter of 20 minutes.
Oh wow. Incredible. And the beaches, I mean these incredible beaches. Yeah.
The whole island is just surrounded by them, and you'll be the only person on the beach. It's not, it's in a country, so you definitely see women on the beaches, and you don't see anybody on the beach for that reason, except for a few fishermen. But just unbelievable. If you're a nature lover, Socotra it blows Galapagos in my opinion. But
And more accessible in some sense. I mean Galapagos, you're juggling different ships and what prices and what itineraries and what timing. I mean Socotra, I mean, as it was before the pandemic for a year or so, it was a weekly flight. If more flights occurred, I mean, you could if you only had a day, you could see dragon's blood trees, you could see bottle trees. You're repaid by a longer visit, but even a short visit, incredible potential.
really no connection to the island at all. So, and in any foreseeable future, the connection through Yemen is not happening, and until there's a dispute between Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates of who controls the island, I think it's going to be away, out of reach for many. And in a way, that's a plus, because when it's out of reach, then the nature is preserved. There's no hotels being built. You know, you can come and kind of enjoy the last remaining piece of Earth.
Yeah, well, speaking of out of touch, I'm very interested to hear about East Antarctica.
Yeah, that was the trip that happened last December. I actually spent New Year's and Christmas in East Antarctica. I've been to Antarctica the traditional route, the one from Ushuaia or Punta
Mhm.
twice there, and didn't. I wanted to see the other part of Antarctica, the Australian and the New Zealand Antarctica out of the other hemisphere. So it's a much longer trip in terms of getting to Antarctica because it takes about 5 days. And for those who've been to Antarctica, they know how crossing the Drake can be a little bit painful,
Mhm.
flying around you, but that's just one day. Here you're crossing the same rough oceans, and it's
Mm.
5 days of being in a new.
Look sideways.
And that was nothing. That was basically you could come out on the deck and photograph the ship going left and right at almost 45 degree. But when it was completely rough, when you can't even get out of the room, 4 days of that. But then you get to Antarctica eventually to the part that not maybe one or two or three ships come a year, and some
Mm.
research ships. There's the competition in Argentina and Antarctica is just out of, well, not anymore with COVID, but it's probably there's ship on the ship on the ship. And then here you're alone with penguins, with emperor penguins. You can see them on the ice. You can see that basically live only there and nowhere else. We landed on some of the floating ice, and penguins just basically jumped to your feet and kind of looked at you. Who the hell are you? And then a lot of islands in the sub-Antarctic part of that they belong to New Zealand, some to Australia, like Macquarie Island, and
Mm.
those are wildlife paradises. They're uninhabited, but they're massive, hundreds of thousands penguin colonies, hundreds of thousands of sea lions and elephant seals, and it's all cacophony of sound and smell all around you. Yeah, like pictures. And this penguin is looking at these elephant lions and thinking, I don't know what he's thinking.
How much time total is this journey?
It was about 3 weeks total.
Oh, that's a bit less than I would guess. So, and is there a specific operator you booked with, and do you recommend them?
Well, the last year it was only Heritage Expeditions that was doing it out of New Zealand. There was nobody else. I think there were plans for one more, but I mean they kind of have a monopoly on this. The thing is, this we did manage to actually land in East Antarctica outside of the ice shelf.
Mm.
But that's in the last three expeditions there nobody was able to land. Even there's a French base in the French Antarctic and there's Australian base in Australian Antarctic, and both of them are kind of supplied by air off of the ships. So the ice situation there, unlike in the other side of Antarctica, is a little more severe. Oh, maybe it's a good thing. The ice is not melting.
So,
And
for those that are very serious box tickers, these are very uncertain landings.
yeah, but then the landings on the subantarctic islands are very certain, and every the Bounty Island, the Macquarie Island, and in terms of wildlife, you know, out of this 19 species of or 22, I think, species of albatross, there's 15 in that you can see on this trip. That's nuts. We were close to these albatrosses on the island, basically within feet, and
Mm-hmm.
and playing. And there's a world's biggest bird, it's 3 meter wingspan, like a ship.
Wow, incredible. So that I'm sure you're going to say it's absolutely worth it, whatever the price Heritage is charging. If you can manage it, you're giving it a thumbs up.
Absolutely.
And Lily was asking back. You mentioned the migrations as your early passion. So give us your ranking. I don't know if Nomad Mania probably formed a committee and put up a list in the past hour, but your great migrations. Which are the ones to seek out around the world?
Gosh, there's so many. Not necessarily in order of which one's the best, but I'll try to come up with. I mean, the migration of butterflies in Mexico was one of the, absolutely out of this world things that I've seen, and that was one of the first. Um, where you basically end up in the middle of the mountain forest, and there are billions of monarch butterflies hanging on the branches all around you. The orcas, seeing orcas was incredible. Then seeing the beluga whales in northern Canada,
Hmm.
hundreds of them in a shallow bay, and they come in close to shore and they rub their old skin trying to get rid of it, and then polar bears attack them. That's like in one trip. Whale pretty much in all over the world. Whale migrations in Baja California, well, in Mexican side, where they come into a shallow bay and reproduce, and you can take a little tiny glass boat with a single guide, and you basically drive up to the whales, and you touch baby whales with your hands. It's nuts. Whale migration in Madagascar was incredible, and then probably one of my top five migrations was the one in Zambia. Uh,
Mm.
the flying foxes, the bats, where you have to difficult to get to. It's right on the border with Congo in the north. It's not particularly a safe area, but you fly out there and you camp there, and you can stay in a couple lodges there. But it's basically in the evening, 11 million massive bats fly out in the red sky, and it's just like wow.
You've lost me dreaming of all of this, and I'm sharing in the show notes on your website the animal migrations page, where people can find much more information. And the second you open the page, I mean the Zambia pops right out there. I mean, from sunrise to sunset is what jumps out to me on these posts, and it's incredible resource you've assembled.
Thank you. Yeah, the website I think by now has. I mean, basically, I've been posting everything on Facebook, but then everything gets transferred to that website. So, I think by now it has probably 5,000 pages with 170,000 pictures on them. So it's almost. You even notice in this conversation, you ask something, and I kind of refer to the website. It's not
Mhm.
because I promote it, because I'm not. It's really it's a resource for me myself and for all the friends. Like this is where you should go see this. If you're going there, check this out, and maybe I can organize a little bit better. But it's in terms of resource, it's all there.
And that's what I'm in awe of. I mean, so many of us, myself included, and I do have a website, but I think I'm 6 years behind in posting anything on trips, and you fall behind and then end up giving up. So talk about this workflow, if that's the right word for how you maintain this discipline. It sounds like it's a Facebook to website feed. I mean, how do
Uh,
you stick with it?
well, it's really Facebook kind of takes priority. I post fresh pictures on Facebook and albums. I mean, it takes taking pictures first, then writing up a little commentary about it.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I make it funny. Sometimes it's dry. And then Instagram is kind of secondary. I really don't have time for that. But my Instagram page is at Travel to Unlimited, but there's also at Love to Unlimited, where it's me and my girlfriend, and she's much more diligent posting stuff as we go. So you can probably check that one out as well.
Hmm.
And then the website is when I get a chance to update it and sort of load everything there. But yeah, it was all self-created. I probably need an assistant for that at this point.
Well, it's a very, as I said, very impressive website, and they're great. And I think so many of us that say in a community like Every Passport Stamp, I mean, we're experienced travelers in the sense we don't need to know how to find a restaurant to eat at. There may be a very special one, but at least we'll be fed with this inspiration. I've not heard of the Zambia bat migration. This.
Well, it's interesting because I had a book. I bought it maybe like 12 years ago, and it's one of the National Geographic, or maybe it's a Lonely Planet edition that says where to see wildlife and when. And they
Oh.
had a little page on different migrations and so on and so forth. And then I read about the bats and I Googled some of it, and you can't find many pictures because it's completely out of the way. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who owns a travel company in Zambia, and the company is one of the premier, top companies in Zambia, and she never heard of that migration even being there. So he was shocked to learn about it. She organized, a flight with her friend on a private plane, and she was basically we went there just for her to experience it.
Huh, wow. Incredible. So talk a little bit about your lifestyle. So you've professionally, you're traveling at this point. You're juggling things. What does your lifestyle look like?
It's really kind of professionally traveling. I quit my job in 2013. Well, I got quit. The tiny little financial company I was working at got purchased by a bigger one, and we didn't really agree on the route forward from there. And they said, well, maybe we can kind of lay you off and give you 3 months to decide what you want to do.
Hmm.
I got 3 paid months, and I went, immediately flew to Spitsbergen and then to Germany and then to Ibiza. And I thought that's not enough. Um, so I thought maybe 3 more months and then I'll come back to work. And then after 6 months, I realized, well, wait a second, let's make it a year. It's a nice round number. And, I can say I took a sabbatical gap year before coming back to work. And then you get sucked into it. And then you realize, well, you can pretty much travel nonstop. And you can, it's not as expensive as everybody thinks. The biggest expense of travel is getting from A to B and then back to A. That's the flying, and you have to find a couple weekend days that you're free, or find 1 week of vacation time free, and then it's probably you'll fly on the most expensive day, you'll fly in the most expensive season, and when you can have a whole year in front of you, you can basically go just roaming country to country, not in the COVID days, but in the past or in the future, hopefully. And you can do it on pennies on the dollar and see the whole world. And once
Hmm.
you're sucked into it, you can't imagine yourself waking up in the office and waking up at home and going to the office when you can basically wake up in a different country every day. So
Yeah.
it's and some people get addicted to drugs and some people get addicted to travel, and you can probably and everybody in this group understands it very well.
Yeah, the other day, my wife and I were just taking an evening walk, and we passed by like an office park that, just seeing windows into empty offices. It just says, oh, that's what they look like. It seems so foreign, and neither of us have had meetings in 6 months that would take us into an office. Yeah, it looks so sad and unhappy. Although the necessity for so much of it, when you just see those empty meeting chairs and that's it works for many people, and for some of us, it's just please develop an allergy to it.
And I agree that traveling is difficult in times of COVID and
Mhm.
pandemic, and I'm definitely not one of the deniers. I don't think it's not real. I think it's quite real. I know friends who actually ended up in hospital with pneumonia and got sick and all. But on the other hand, sitting at home, you're not necessarily protecting yourself for sure. I mean, we traveled all around Ukraine and all around the United States, but we traveled carefully. We you wear a mask everywhere. You try not to get
Mhm.
into crowds. You stay away from people not protecting themselves, and you
Mhm.
sort of observe and respect all the rules, and it's fine. You know.
Well, very well said, and wonderful inspiration for our travels whenever all of us are back on the road and able to see some of these. I think Zambia just jumped way high up on my list, and East Antarctica, you nudged it back on the how can I rationalize the cost thing. So, thank you for joining us today, Russ.